A few years ago, I started this reading challenge where it is basically trying to read a book from every single country in the world reading challenge. I did a total of one episode of that series, and then I never updated it ever again for reasons that maybe we can talk later. I feel like it's time for us to go back to this series, and in this video we are going to be reading two books from two different countries, but also I'm going to be updating you on all the other books from all the other countries that I read in the meantime, because I did read books from multiple different countries in the past year. Not enough, not as much as I was expecting, but enough that we can do an update. So the first book we're going to be reading in this reading vlog, we are going to be flying to the land of ABBA and Avicii and Max Martin and just pop music gods, pop music, like great pop music greats, the land of Spotify, the land of some of my favorite music, like the land from the people that wrote Mamma Mia. We are going to Sweden, and we are going to start by reading Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. Honestly, I could pick so many books for Sweden because low-key, I have quite a bit of books from Sweden randomly on my TBR. Like I think I have 3 Fredrik Backman, who is like the Swedish author right now on my TBR. I think I have, it's somewhere around here, the Saga of Kosa Berling, which is a Swedish classic from the first female author to win the Nobel Literature Prize. I know I have a book called The Sisters, which is about family dynamics and immigration in Sweden. Like, I have so many books from Sweden on my TBR, but today we are going to be reading this Swedish author right now, but a book that it isn't as popular as some of his other books. We are going to be reading Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. I am going back whenever I have any updates about that book. I'm currently 32% through reading Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman, so I can tell you a little bit about what the book's about, even though honestly the best way to go into this book is going to it blind and not knowing much about the book, in my opinion. But essentially in Britt-Marie Was Here, we follow Britt-Marie. She is a 63-year-old woman who she's dealing with a lot of stuff in her life, and she got a job to be the groundskeeper for this community center in this very small town, a small village that is going through a rough time financially. Not many people live there, and the people that live there, they are not really well off financially, and the city is not in its best time. Things are quite rough for people in this town, and somehow Britt-Marie, she finds herself as the groundskeeper for this community center where she's there for the job. This part you understand a little bit more right at the beginning of the book, but I would rather not tell you if you don't already know what this book is about, because I feel like this part is better going into it blindly. But essentially, Britt-Marie is working at this small town, and this book is essentially so far a story about community, second chances, and just platonic love, like love in general, and community, finding your community, because so far we are following Britt-Marie finding her community, and Britt-Marie, she's quite a peculiar woman. She's very straight to the point. She likes to do things a certain way, in her way, and in this book we find a little bit more. So far we found a little bit more of why she's this way, why she acts certain ways, and why she makes some of the decisions she makes. But essentially she's very straight to the point. Some people don't really understand, don't really like her, think she can be quite kind of rude, but this is just her way, and she's not necessarily that she's being rude or that she's mad at people. It's just her way. She's not necessarily sometimes try to offend people. She's just very straight to the point, very dry, and it's Britt-Marie, and she's a very peculiar woman. And honestly, I'm really enjoying this book so far. That I'm enjoying Britt-Marie. At the beginning, I didn't like her very much because I feel like you're not supposed to really like her because you still don't understand her, and just her way of being can be a little bit too much, not very, not necessarily socially appropriate, but it's not kind of the social norm, the way she acts. But so far I'm really enjoying the book. I like the way Fredrik Backman writes his stories. I like his writing style. I'm not necessarily in love, but also I'm not hating it, and I do want to continue reading this book because the part where I stopped, it's the part where this book it's starting to pick up the plot and the story, and you're starting to understand the character a little bit more. Also, so far I really like Sven. I hope I continue to really like Sven throughout this whole story. Also, the kids are so cute because Britt-Marie essentially just unintentionally becoming the coach for this little league team, like this children's football team, because football, or if you're American, soccer is a very important part of the story, but not necessarily like the sport itself, though the sport itself is an important part of the story, but I would argue it's more the metaphor behind the sport itself, the community aspect of football. And yes, I'm really enjoying the characters. None of them are like picture perfect, though they are not necessarily like black and white. They are not your stereotypical perfect little characters, but I'm really enjoying them. They're not necessarily like bad characters, they're not evil, they're just people, and they feel realistic in some way. And I'm just really enjoying this book. I want to go back to reading it, see where the story is going, because I have a feeling the story will start to pick up a little bit more, and I might start enjoying even more of the story, even though so far I am really enjoying the story. It's just like not groundbreaking, it's not wow, but I'm really enjoying the story and the characters, and I feel like I'm in the part of the story where things are starting to pick up in terms of the plot and the characters, and you are starting to understand the dynamics between these characters, the town, and who is Britt-Marie, why she's acting this way. So I'm going to put on some comfy clothes, because by the time I'm filming this clip, it's the release day for The Devil Wears Prada 2, and I just came back from the movie, so I'm in black, and I don't know if you can tell. Can you see in the frame? I don't think. I'm wearing black and red. I'm wearing red pants in honor of the movie, but we are going to be putting comfy clothes because it's also quite late. It's, I think, like 9 p.m. So it's quite late. Let's put comfy clothes and go back to reading this book. And I will come back when I have any updates for this book and the other book in this video. Hi, hello. So it's been a few days since I finished reading Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman, and I was trying to think about a way to do a review for this book, because while at one point I really enjoyed reading Britt-Marie Was Here, at another point I also didn't necessarily love the story. I really liked the story, but it isn't something that gave me, you feel like, wow. It's kind of like a weird book to review, because essentially Britt-Marie Was Here is a story about community, second chances, and also just finding yourself. And overall, the most important aspect of the story is the community aspect of Britt-Marie and Britt-Marie finding her people, and this small town in Sweden, in the countryside of Sweden. And I really like the message of the book. I really like the book in general. I really enjoy Fredrik Backman's writing style. But at the other end, this book, while I really enjoyed it, didn't spark something in me. I ended up giving Britt-Marie Was Here 3.5 stars because it's a really good book. I can understand why some people might love it. I personally really enjoyed the book. It's just a book that lacked a spark for me. And that's essentially everything. Kind of like all I have to say about this book. That's the final review for Britt-Marie Was Here. But if we can go on, have a little talk about some things on this book. The first one is that Fredrik Backman's books, I read one Fredrik Backman book before. I read a short story. I forgot the name for the short story, but it was a short story, a Christmas short story, and it was really sad. And Britt-Marie Was Here, there are also some things that happen that are really sad. And then I heard some other things about these other books that also sound to be really sad. And while I have, I think, 2 or 3 other Fredrik Backman books on my TBR, I have to check my TBR spreadsheet, but I know that I have at least 2 other books by Fredrik Backman on my TBR, And I don't know if I'm going to like prioritize reading them. There's some like I have a friend called Ove. No, I have a man called Ove by Fredrik Backman on my TBR. I kind of want to read it just because it's so hyped up. I have seen such great things about it. There is a movie I would like to watch. But also, I have a feeling it will be sad. And then I think my grandmother sends her regards or something like that. I don't remember exactly the title. Let me check. It's on Kindle. Okay, so I found it on my Kindle. So the short story that I read before by Fredrik Backman is called The Deal of a Lifetime. This is a Christmas short story. And the other book on my Kindle that I have from Fredrik Backman is My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologizes. And while I want to read it, it is on my TBR after all. And I do like Fredrik Backman's writing style. It's not a book I think I will prioritize just because the other two works by itself were so sad, and I hear other parts of his work, some other books by itself are sad. I'm not in a phase in my life where I want to read sad books. I'm not in the mood to read sad books. So while I do still plan on reading them, it's not books that I want to prioritize just because of this aspect of the author's works. But if you like sad books, maybe if you haven't checked out Fredrik Backman before, I do recommend checking out because his books are sad and they are really well written, and the stories, they are really emotional, and I just think I really like the work by this author that I have read, but not sure if it is my style of book right now. Another thing about Britt-Marie was here, going back to the book I just finished reading, is that I read an English translation, and I'm not sure if the translation was the greatest. Nothing against the translator, I don't remember the name of the translator, and nothing against the translator or his work, but this book takes place in Sweden. These characters are Swedish, and the translation just felt very British, which at times felt kind of like jarring. I'm not British. I was not born in the UK at all. I don't live in the UK at all. English isn't even my first language. It's just my second language. But English is not my first language. But I did do bilingual high school, and I do understand enough from the English language to know that the translation that I read was feeling quite British in a way that sometimes was taking me out of the story, because there will be moments where the characters would say something and it's like, this is kind of like a British slang, this is a Britishism. So it would kind of take me out of the story, because this book takes place in Sweden, these characters are Swedish, they won't be talking like this, they won't be using Britishisms, and I know this is a translation, and I'm pretty sure the version of the book that I have is the UK book edition, because you can choose where I live. You can choose if you want the UK version or the US version most of the times, and I'm pretty sure I have the UK version. So I'm not sure it's because I have the UK version, but even if it was, again, these characters are Swedish, so I shouldn't be spotting Britishisms, British slang in the text. You need to not use regional slang on the text, because this book is not British. The characters are not British. The characters are Swedish. The story takes place in Sweden. It just doesn't make sense, and sometimes whenever I would spot something that was like, oh, this is very British, this is very British coded, it takes me out of the story a little bit, but then we ignore. And maybe that's another reason why this book wasn't like wow for me. Maybe it was this aspect of the translation and the fact that I kept spotting it. And you have read this book before and you have spotted some Britishism in the text, please let me know in the comments. Let's talk about it, because I'm curious if the US edition would also have these aspects. I'm curious if it's just a me thing. I'm curious if it's just because English is not my first language and I did bilingual high school, and I had teachers from multiple different Anglophone countries. I was exposed to so many accents and like slangs and ways of talking and speaking English, and writing English and all these slangs because of my teachers, because I grew up watching TV shows in English from multiple different countries. I watched multiple Australian shows as a child. There were also, the classic American shows that were so popular in the 2000s, and then there were the UK shows that were popular also in the 2000s. And I don't know if it is because of my background that sometimes I can spot it. I feel like I'm not that great at spotting it, especially when it's very specifically regional, just because English is not my first language, and because of my background when it comes to the language. Sometimes, like, for me it's just English. There are things that for me are easier to spot, there are others that they just blend together, but for some reason in this book it just felt very British. So if you read this book and you spotted Britishisms, like, talk in the comment section. I'm really curious if this is just a personal experience because of the edition of the book that I had, because of my background, or if this is just the book in itself. So now let's move on to a Carol that will be updating you on all the other books that could fit to different countries in this vlog. And then we're going to move on to the second book we are going to be reading in this vlog. Hi, this is Carol here with the same outfit because I'm filming this on the same day to tell you about all the other books that I read for the trying to read a book for every single country in the world kind of challenge. I'm trying to read one book for each country in the world. Not going to lie, I haven't made great progress with this list, and one of the reasons is because I kept overthinking it. I think I said in the previous clip, in the first clip for this vlog, but I kept overthinking it all the time. I kept like, oh, but this is not the perfect book for this country, how will I film this vlog? And there was a moment where I'm like, let's just stop overthinking it, especially if you have already read a book from this country before. I feel even more comfortable to just read whatever, and honestly, let's just read whatever. Especially if I have it on my TBR, let's just read whatever. If the author is from this country, we are going to count it for this country. And let's just update you on the books that I have been reading for the past year for this challenge. First, let's talk about the 3 books that I read in the previous vlog, because it's been like over a year. So even if you watched that vlog when I posted it, you might not remember the books, but for the first vlog in series, I read The Three Bodies Problem to China, which was a very popular sci-fi, very much sci-fi lovers love that book. I do like sci-fi. I really didn't like that book. I thought it was extremely boring. The characters were very one-dimensional. This book was very science heavy, and more specifically physics heavy. It's just not my style of sci-fi, so personally I didn't like The Three Bodies Problem, which I read for China. And then we move on to Ireland, for which I read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, and I really love that book. It's one of my favorite books, one of my favorite Sally Rooney's I read. And then we move on to Brazil, my country, and for my country I ended up reading what is now one of my favorite books ever, and a book I highly recommend reading it if you like poetic writing. And I read The Words That Remain by Staniel Cardell. This is a very short story, a very short novel where we follow this young man who he was born to a very poor family in a very poor village in the northeast of Brazil. And this book is essentially a book about love, platonic love, romantic love, familial love, and it's just such a beautiful book in terms of the way it is written. Like, I love the writing style, also the story. It's just such a beautiful story, it's such a beautiful book from a storytelling perspective and from a writing perspective. Again, one of my favorite books ever. Now let's move on to all the other books that I read that I could add to this challenge. So at the beginning of the year, most of the books I read in 2025, and at the beginning of 2025 I was like, let's just stop overthinking and let's just add the books to this list. So we are going to start by the United States. I read The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This is a very important novel for the feminist movement, where we follow this woman who has technically the perfect life, but she's not happy for a perfect life. And this book is we followed this woman, and I really understand why this book was really important at the time, and why this book is really important to the feminist movement, especially the American feminist movement. I was extremely bored by it, so that's for the United States. Then we read for Canada, and I have it here. I'm going to get the book. It's right here. This I read. This is another one of the physical books. Actually, I also have Beautiful World Where Are You by Sally Rooney right next to me. And The Three Boys Problem is also right next to me. And The Words That Remain is also quite next to me. I could have easily have a caught up and catch the books. But we have Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a sci-fi, and we follow, like, there is this weird thing that happens in Vancouver, and then it happens like multiple different years, and then we are kind of like figure out what this weird event was in this book. And I really enjoyed reading it. I kind of want to reread it. I even highlighted a quote here, which I think is very relevant nowadays. Let's read this quote. Everything offended Jessica, which is inevitable when you move through the world in search of offense, which it's a quote that I think is really relevant nowadays, because there are definitely people out there that love to be offended by absolutely everything. There are things that you should be offended by, but there are some people that are offended by absolutely everything. So I really like this quote. I really like this book, and I kind of want to reread it because I read it at the beginning of 2025 and I remember really enjoying it. I remember the book. I liked Amy St. John Mandel's writing style. I want to read more by the author, but I didn't manage to pick up anything else by the author, in part because I'm kind of not buying many physical books right now. But yes, read Sea of Tranquility by Amy St. John Mandel by Canada. By the way, Canada is one of the countries that, especially throughout last year, I could have added so many books. It's one of the countries that I was kind of overthinking what books to add to the list, because United States and Canada are two countries I could have put so many books in this list. I decided to put the first book from that country that I read in 2025 to the list, because again, so many books that could have gone. And then we read for England. Again, first book from England that I read in 2025. I added The Boyards by Eliza Clark. This is also a very hyped up novel a few years ago, where we follow a very unlikable character, and I had really high expectations for this book. I really didn't enjoy the book. I liked the technical aspect, I liked the writing style. The main character, who is supposed to be an unlikable main character, she just really annoyed me, and I really didn't like the book because of the main character. I just felt like she was just so extremely dumb in a way that kind of ruined the book for me. Then we move on to Russia. Russia is another one of those countries where I read multiple books from Russia. Not last year. Last year I decided to take a little bit of a break from anything that comes, like any books that come from Russia, because every single book that I read from Russia are kind of depressing, and I'm not in a phase in my life where I want to read sad books, depressing books. So I definitely didn't have this book, but again, I have read so many books from Russia. But basically for Russia I put The Power of the Darkness by Leo Tolstoy, and this is a play, and I absolutely hated it. I didn't have halfway through reading this play because I just couldn't do it anymore. But I decided to add it to this list again, because when you're not overthinking, second, I have read so many books from Russia before. I have read War and Peace. I think War and Peace is like I could have already crossed before Russia, because I read War and Peace. Also have a love-hate relationship with War and Peace because I like the technical aspect, hate the story because there's too much war, and in general just like Russian classics. Every single Russian classic that I read, they're just so depressing, and I don't really like them. I still have some on my TBR, which I will read one day because they are on my TBR, but I can't, not anticipating reading them right now because so sad and depressing. Russia, what is going on with you? I can have a guess considering the history of Russia and the weather of Russia, the climate of Russia, but also Russia, what is going on with you? Why so sad? Now let's move on to Japan, and I also have this book right here. Since I already got Sea of Tranquility, let's put Sea of Tranquility back and get the next book. So for Japan, we read Days at the Murasaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yashisawa. If I'm pronouncing the name of the author wrong, I'm sorry. But this is a classic cozy Asian fiction, Japanese fiction, where we follow this young woman who's just kind of depressed, and then she goes to live with her uncle in his bookshop in Tokyo, Japan. And it's just a coming of age story. It's a story where she's rethinking life. She is kind of rethinking her life choices, figuring out what she wants to do with her life. You know, it's just your classic Asian cozy fiction. I really liked when I read it, but also kind of not going to lie, I don't think about it at all. Don't think I think about it is that this character lives in a bookshop, which is amazing. But yes, also I tapped some pages, but I didn't highlight any quotes. I probably forgot to highlight quotes. I just thought here the pages, and I no longer remember what I was supposed to highlight. It's been so long. I read it at the beginning of 2025. But yes, Days at the Murasaki Bookshop I read for Japan. Now let's move on to Italy. We also have this book near me. Let's go get it. Here we have In the Margins by Elena Ferrante. Italy is also another one of those countries where I read so much books from Italy. So let's not overthink it. And last year I read In the Margins by Elena Ferrante, one of my favorite authors. And this is a collection, I think it's 4 essays by Ferrante on reading and writing as a craft. And I really enjoyed reading this book at the time, but not going to lie, kind of don't remember much about it. I kind of need to reread it because I remember there were some points here that I really enjoyed. I think I need to reread some of my favorite essays from Ferrante in this book. Now let's move on to the next book on my list, which is... It's also near me. Okay, so far, essentially the rest of 2025, I read like In the Margins, I think halfway through 2025, and then I kind of failed to keep up with this challenge until like December 2025 because of reasons where honestly I can't say, oh, I don't know what's going on. I know what was going on. For most of 2025, I'm pretty sure I was reading mostly like comfort books, because I needed to read some comfort books at the time. So I kind of forgot to continue reading the challenge, and most of the books that I read were from countries I had read before, like Canada. A lot of Canadian books, a lot of American books, a lot of comfort genres. But at the end of the year, I decided to pick a book that we would step foot on a new continent. I picked The Fall by Albert Camus, or La Chute by Albert Camus, to read from Algeria, because I read another Camus before. I read The Stranger, and the book I remember takes place in Algeria. This book doesn't take place in Algeria. I went into this book blind, so very surprised to learn that this book takes place in the Netherlands, not Algeria. And it's another book that I will need to reread one day, because I feel like, because I went into it completely blind, I feel like some things just went way over my head in this book. And also like it's Camus. It's a good book to reread because sometimes things can go over your head. And also I read this book quite slowly, and I think it's a book that you shouldn't read slowly. You need to read need to binge read it in a way, not necessarily binge read it, but you can take a week off from reading this book, because then things will start going over your head, like it did for me, and it was kind of meh. I still put this book for Algeria, because again, for reasoning, let's not overthink it. Algeria is a country that I read before. I read another Camus before, a book that took place in Algeria. Camus, I know he's kind of like Algerian French. He was born in Algeria, he wrote about Algeria, but also like he's French, because it was the time that Algeria was a French colony, and then he passed away in France. And like Algeria was one of those countries where I was like, what should I put there? Because should I put a book by the guy who was born in the country, but he's like also kind of French, but also he was born in Algeria, and again, not overthinking it. I think I said it before, I never said it before in this channel. I feel kind of like an arrogant Brit talking about it again, but I studied French. I went to French school, and part of my French schooling was that we read a lot of books from French-speaking country except Quebec. We didn't read anything in Quebecois because Quebec French is a whole different genre of French, but I studied French from basically every single other country that speaks French. I'm very familiar with African French, Belgian French, France French, and I read books from all these other countries. I read plenty of books from Algeria before, from Algerian authors that took place in Algeria. I know way too much about Algeria for someone that is not from Algeria and hasn't gone to Algeria, just because I learned it during French school. And also, I'm kind of a nerd and I need to know what I'm reading about, understand what I'm reading about, understand the geopolitical aspects of what I'm reading about. So I put La Chute by Bergamo because he was born in Algeria. Let's not overthink it. This section, I'm looking at how long this footage is. It's already way too long. So let's move on, because last year I finished December reading The Fall by Bergamo, which we can put it for Algeria. This is the first book from Africa that we read from. We need to read more books from Africa, but I also need to find more books from Africa, which books on my TBR from Africa. I don't think there are many, so please let me know in the comment section. Give me your African book recommendations, because I don't think I have enough on my TBR right now. But then let's move on to the other book I read, which is the only book I read this year after Fredrik Backman. I believe this is actually also the only book that could fit in this challenge, besides the ones that I'm reading in this vlog. I'm doing so bad at this challenge. Why did I start? Why did I care what you're doing? But now that I started, I'm going to continue reading it, and we are going to occasionally do these vlogs where I can update you, and I need to try and do a better job. Stop reading only comfort books and go back to reading books from everywhere. But basically, the only book this year, besides the ones in this vlog, that I read that could fit in this challenge is that I read from South Korea. I read The Dollar Good Dream Department Store by Mie Lee, kind of read it by accident without knowing that the author was from South Korea, but again, cozy Asian fiction. These books, it follows this young woman called Penny who gets a job working at the Dollar Good Dream Department Store, which is a department store at this magical town where they sell dreams to humans, pets. They sell dreams, and it's kind of like light fantasy, cozy fiction. I really liked it when I read it. It was what I needed to read at the time, but also like, I find that most of those cozy fictions, they are nice to read, but most of the times they are kind of also like forgettable. When I look at it, when I see the cover, I'm like, oh, this was such a cute, nice, heartwarming book. But also, I don't really think about it much, but sometimes it's just what you need, a cozy little low stakes book. And that was what the Dollar Good Dream Department Store was. Hi, it's Carol. I'm back because I forgot to mention one book on the list of books that I have already read from different countries. But I read a book from Australia which was called An Academic Affair by, I believe, is Jodie McAllister, the name of the author. And this is a slow burn rivals to lovers romance where we follow these academic rivals that are currently working as professors in university. And it's university, like academic life in Australia, and basically things are not going very great, and one of these characters, they get a job as a tenured professor at the university in Tasmania, so one of the characters marries the other so they can both get a job as a tenured professor. And this book is from Australia, so we can already cross off Australia from the list of countries I need to read from. Now let's move on to the second book we are reading in this vlog, and it is from Germany. So we are traveling to Germany, we are staying in Europe. We are reading Maxton. I think it's called Save Me. This is the first book in the trilogy of the Maxton trilogy by Kasten. If I'm pronouncing the author's name wrong, I'm sorry. But essentially, I know this book takes place in England, even though the author is German. But I have a feeling, from when I watched the show, for me it was very obvious. The story was very German, but taking place in the UK, but it was very German coded. I looked at the actors and I was like, oh, this is German. But essentially, if you haven't watched or read Maxton Hall, this is a trilogy that follows James and Ruby. They both study at this super prestigious prep school called Maxton Hall in England. It's super expensive, only extremely wealthy people go. Ruby doesn't come from a wealthy family. She studies there with a scholarship, but James, he's the heir to one of the biggest, most famous luxury brands in the UK, and his family is very, very wealthy and kind of dysfunctional. And Ruby has a very loving family, and at the beginning of the book, Ruby finds out a secret from James' sister, and he kind of tries to blackmail her to not tell anyone about his sister's secret, and they don't get along at the beginning of the book, but then there is a romance that starts building between these characters. So this is kind of like academic setting, enemies to lovers, kind of toxic love in some aspects, because this, at least not necessarily their love in this book. I have a feeling the other book, from what I heard, might become more toxic, but it's more like toxic environment kind of situation. And I've been reading this book for a few days now. I've been slowly making my way through reading this book, and I'm like 75-85% through reading this book. I'm almost finishing it. This book in my hands, it feels smaller, but it's because I have a Brazilian edition, and Brazilian books tend to be thinner than the UK or US books because of the way that they are binded, the binding of the books, and also the paper. But this book is around 350 pages, and I'm like 85% through reading this book. My feelings about Maxton Hall, the book, is the same of my feelings for Maxton Hall, the show. First of all, I feel like Maxton Hall, the show, was a great adaptation. There are some things about the show that I can already see that are different from the book, but overall, at least the first season is a great adaptation of the first book. And for me, that shows that my feelings for the book is the same as my feelings for the show. At the beginning of the book, I felt like this is very much not a book for me, because this book follows a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old. They're both around 18-year-old, because Ruby turns 18 in this book. But essentially, this book is following teenagers in a high school. I'm not a teenager in a high school, even though sometimes people think I'm a kind of a teenager. I'm pretty much not a teenager in a high school. I'm in my late 20s. So at the beginning of the book, I felt like this book wasn't for me, because I'm not in a phase in my life where I want to read about teenagers in high school. It's just not the style of story of book that talks to me. And also, James is just disgusting as a character. I hate his character at the beginning of the book. I just like, no, thank you. What do you mean this is the love interest? But then after a while, I continue reading, because it's kind of like a cute pleasure. And this book, essentially, one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure I continue reading this book is because I'm a soap opera girly. I grew up watching soap opera. I'm Brazilian. Brazil is a very big soap opera country. My grandparents love soap operas. I grew up watching soap operas with my grandparents. And because of that, I really like soap operas. Even when I don't necessarily agree with them, even when I'm like side-eyeing or, oh my god, like kind of the ones who binge watch the soap opera, because there are a lot of things about it I don't watch. I'm always tuning into soap operas because I just like watching them. They are kind of my thing. Maxton Hall feels like a soap opera. It's dramatic, it has a love story, it has a romance in it, you have like you have multiple side characters. A lot of the characters are kind of like gray, they are morally gray, they are not picture perfect, and again, a lot of drama where you want to find out. And this book kind of feels like a soap opera in a way. So if you like soap opera, maybe you like Maxton. I still have a little bit to finish reading it. This book's definitely not a 5-star, but also like I'm liking reading this book because again it feels like a soap opera and it's kind of like a guilty pleasure for me. And I know this book takes place in England, the characters are supposed to be British even though the author is very much German. My thing for this challenge is that I'm not overthinking it. If I overthink it, I'm going to be paralyzed. So because the author is German, I'm going to put this book for Germany. Also, I have read other books from Germany before, so that also makes me feel even more comfortable to put Maxton for Germany. So I'm going to go back to finish reading this book, and then I will come back with my final review for it. So I finished reading Maxton, and honestly, my opinions about this book continue being the same. This book isn't necessarily the best book, a book I love. It is just a cute pleasure. It feels like soap opera in the form of a book. And as a person that likes soap opera, I enjoyed this book because of the more soap opera-y elements in this book. So I ended up giving Maxton 3.75 stars. Again, not a book I particularly love and I think it's amazing and it's this incredible work of art, the best book I ever read. It's literally a guilty pleasure. James, he gives me the ick throughout the whole book. There are moments where he's a little bit better, but overall, James as a character, he just gives me massive ick, and I think Ruby should leave him, but this is a romance book. This book has a strong romance plot, so you know, you can already guess what happens. But yes, Maxton, a guilty pleasure. So that's kind of it for this video. If there is any book you think I should read next, please let me know in the comment section what countries should I read next for this challenge. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and I hope to see you with a new video very soon. Bye!